Hello, everybody. Welcome to the LJL Officially Unofficial Podcast, otherwise known as the LJLOUP, Season 2, Episode 10. Now, I know I said Episode 10 last time, but your boy wrote down his notes wrong, meaning this one is the definitive Season 2, Episode 10. All right? It doesn't matter. Fake news is everywhere around us. Or your boy is just kind of a bit of an airhead and forgets to double, triple check himself sometimes. Anyway, regardless of that being said, gentlemen, welcome to this podcast. Everybody out there, ladies and gentlemen, I have the fantastic Nymaera on the opposite side of your screens and the laudable Initia1ise in the middle. Gentlemen, hello, welcome to the podcast, both of you.
Hello. Back again, episode 10. Wow, we've done this 10 times. Feels much more for some reason.
This is like the second season or something. I've kind of lost track.
It's definitely along those kind of lines. I mean, gentlemen, Nymaera, what exactly is this podcast? Because we started definitively of saying the 10th of the 10th of the 10th episode of something, and what is the 10th of the
through the powers of 10 combined, we become sorcerers, and we cast and podcast things about Japanese League of Legends. For of all the topics in the world, it's Japanese League of Legends. I know if you had that kind of unlimited power, trust me, you'd be paralyzed by choice too. But that's what we've chosen to do: cover things such as the LJL, the League of Legends Japanese League, and that's kind of what we do as us three.
I mean, if we've been doing this for a while, this is season 2. Have we got some form of affiliation with Riot? Initia1ise?
Alas. No, we do not. We are doing this off our own back. It's all our own content. But if Riot wants to get involved and give us a heads up, we would love to be talking with them. So, yeah.
With that said, these are our own views and opinions, and you can check out each of our own unique opinions on our own personal feeds. You can check out our Twitter is below each of our faces, at MaskedSwan for myself, at Initia1ise over in the middle, and at Nymaera over on the other side of this screen. Gentlemen, you can also find out this podcast. Did you know you can find this podcast on all audio streaming platforms? Did you know that?
I'd heard some
No,
stuff,
I'm guessing your silence, no.
But then I'd heard about this one thing which it wasn't on. It's not on SoundCloud, so is it really worth
That's an older meme.
For the record, we don't care about SoundCloud. Go away.
I ain't paying for that, so no. Until we get sponsors, yeah.
Oh dear.
It remains to be seen. Gentlemen, this episode we will be recapping the V3 esports facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks series, which was a full 5-game series, obviously recapping on our predictions and then moving forward throughout that series. Some of the plays, some of the moments, and how the two teams both performed. We'll then be covering our expectations around Detonation, Focus Me, Rascal Jester, obviously giving a bit of an overview on how we think these two teams have gotten to this place in that Juggernaut match, and then kind of looking over the two teams and going, well, this is how they've compared previously, what are our expectations and predictions, and then at the end of the show, we'll get into our questions. Let's begin this out rather straightforwardly with V3 Sports versus the Hawks. And gentlemen, none of us here expected this to go to a full 5-game series. And what were your predictions, Initia1ise?
I mean, I had this one as a 3-1 over the V3. I expected one game where Dasher or Zenit got to pop off from an advantage and V3 picked a weird draft they couldn't play through. But I nearly ended up real wrong.
Well, Lexi, you and I had well, I'm sure we had some similar reasoning alongside it. My personal prediction was that 3-0. And I thought that was because the Hawks, while they had like an okay early game, they'd lane okay, I just didn't trust them to actually like pilot the champions in like a cohesive enough fashion all in the same game. Particularly in team fights, because you can have one game when Corporal's got a really good Alistair game, or one game when Dash has got a really good Mage game, and Oriana and Azir, the Victor, but yeah, well, screw that. Apparently, the prep time did them some really good favors, and they showed us a really good series.
Yeah, V3 Esports were able to just eventually figure it out, but I have to agree with you. I didn't think the Hawks would ever figure it out. I thought they would have issues and problems in the pick and ban phase. I didn't think they'd be anywhere near as much a cohesive unit, and some of their team fights were actually far better than I was expecting. And I think, let's be real, lads, When we came into the series, the Hawks had yet to beat or even take a game from anyone above them, and at least they showed that they were able to do that in this series. That was a big change of pace for them now.
Oh, massively, and I think it also, like, I know we were all a little bit wrong-footed when Sengoku Gaming passed up the chance to fight to fight the Hawks. They went for 7-7 CGA. They said, no, that's the better matchup, and having seen this particular series, I can kind of see what they were thinking, because Hawks turned up to play. Like, the games they won honestly well, and they were in a shout for a couple of the other games before they snowballed away from them. So, yeah, massive congrats to the Hawks. I mean, obviously they're going to feel super disappointed for having lost the series, but credit where credit is due. People we asked to turn up, turned up.
And let's start on this series. Let's start with that game number 1, which I believe Nymaera is going to whisk onto your screens right now. If you are listening to the audio version, we will run through this. Obviously, it's V3 Esports on the blue side and the Hawks on the red side. This was the first game, and the Hawks were victorious to all of our expectations. Well, I guess technically, Initia1ise, you're fine with having the first win at the very beginning, but not where we expected the tempo of this series to start, especially in the Hawks' favor. And obviously, that we have seen that can affect a lot of teams. Now, this was a very even game for the first 20 minutes, really. It barely got over that 1.5k gold lead by 22 minutes. However, with a huge team fight happening into a dragon, into another double, it wasn't a double kill, it was just 2 more kills over to the side of Rascal Jester. Wait, I'm looking at the completely wrong match history here. What's
I was thinking, wait a second, this one they did all right with this first game.
Wait a second, I'm looking at DFM versus Rascal Jester.
Oh, that's genius. Well done.
Oh.
Good game, but not the one we were talking about.
Wrong one. Game number 1 of V3 versus the Hawks. That was not good. Early map control from V3 was rather stable. Obviously they were able to get the first few Rift Heralds, which is a big thing because the Hawks had like a very high Rift Herald control, almost 80% before they came into the series. And it was something that the Hawks struggled to really pull back. They did start getting that back. I believe game 3, game 4 is when the series they started getting those objectives, but in game number 1 they lost those, but still were able to find a win. And it started around some of these really big team fights around Drake number 3.
Yeah, it kind of did, in that the Hawks kind of had a few players turn up in the way we were really hoping they would. Dasher and Tussle turned up as an Olaf and an Azir, and actually started making plays around the map. Zenit was on Senna, and he looked really great on that champion when he got his hands on it in the series, which incidentally was when they won games. And he went 10-1-11 by the time it was done. So good plays like the mid-jungle roaming around, Zenit and Corporal stepping up and putting the damage out in the team fights, and man, did they do damage. But the other thing I'll say on the other side is V3 tried to pull a couple counter picks. So Hollow was on a poke Varus in the bot lane, and Cog had drafted an Urgot into the Nara in the top lane, but built it really weird. And I know, Nymaera, you were not a fan of what Cog tried to do, considering he got this counter pick and what it was supposed to be doing in the game.
Yeah, because what I was going to do is, because obviously you brought up a lot of the points about the Hawks, which they did well. I think particularly Tussle being a factor early into the game was really big for this team. So I was going to go, all right, okay, V3, let's go get the Kane out and admonish you just a tad. They picked this Urgot into the Gnar, and they built it Frostfire Gauntlet with a Gargoyle Stone Plate. Of course, you go for the Titanic Hydra first, pretty much always. But Urgot isn't really the front-to-back 5v5 champion unless you've got a really big lead. Because if you execute the first target, flash in for a multi-man fear, yes, incredibly strong champion. Cog did well in those team fights. I think there was one where he ended up pretty much saving a team fight by killing Zenit at the end of it. I think that's the one time they died, actually. Or I might have Dasher instead. Anyway, he ends up picking up some kills at the end of the couple of these team fights, which makes things harder for the Hawks to run across the map. But you should be winning side lanes as the Urgot. You shouldn't really be able to enter into a side lane with a Stride Breaker Gnar. But because this kind of Frostfire Gauntlet build came out, it And Urgot never really gets tanky enough to be considered a tank. So at least with the Stride Breaker, you get to be able to do a lot more damage and have huge side lane threat. I just think that V3 are piloting the Urgot with the wrong game objectives in mind. You shouldn't be trying to front to back. You should be trying to side lane. I think they lost sight of that a bit, and I think they got slapped for it.
I would also like to highlight a huge issue I had with this game, and honestly, it was the bot lane of V3 here. I think...
Yeah.
V3's team fighting partly was centralized around Reiner and Hollow, and I believe both players actually had a pretty lackluster performance in this first game. I would definitely call out Hollow a bit more because his ult misses were far more noticeable than anything else. It took them forever to even land an ultimate that was impactful. I'm remembering the first big team fight where Reiner gets a hook, Cog tries to come in, Ace is trying to do something, and then it's like, oh, okay, this could be a spot for V3. And then Hollow just completely whiffs his ult about through 3 or 4 members of the Hawks, and I'm just like,
yeah,
it was unfortunate.
It was. I mean, I'll also add that he was playing Poke Varus, which is fine if you can make sure people stay way away from you. You're not playing this with the Tahm Kench, and you are playing it into Gnar, Olaf, who can ignore your ult, Azir, Senna, who can hit you from max range anyway, because she's Senna, and of course, Corporal, who was on a Maokai, who'd been farmed because it was fasting Senna. That is a really hard game to sit back and play as Varus. Basically, because so many people have a way to get on you, and Tussle ran at him multiple times, and 3 or 4
as he should,
basically saying, look, I'm gonna ult and run at you, the rest of my team can do with everyone else, but I just need to kill you, because your ult does nothing to me. And they had no way of saving the poor Varus from Olaf, especially once Tussle got a couple early kills, and it made his life a complete nightmare. So yeah, I don't think Hollow played it that well.
I think they should have been more throwaway with it. I think they could have just been like, yo, let's see if it hits, then follow up on it. Because Varus ult, when you're building poke, is not the longest cooldown, particularly because you get, 15 ability haste from a Muramana, 20 from a Dust Blade, 5 from every completed thing after that. You do get a decent amount of ability haste, right? And I think you probably go for even Transcendence, which gives you a bit of ability haste from that rune too. So you do, it is not the longest cooldown in the world.
I don't want to spend too much time on this Varus because it's a recurring thing that we see a lot throughout this series, and I think it's something that we can harp on a lot further on.
I think the thread which I'd link between the Urgot and the Varus is not using it with the correct game objectives in mind. I think that you can be a lot more statistical about your ult usage. I think you can use it to do that and then follow into the Nautilus, particularly because you have the ability to follow up with something like a Shockwave too. I would have preferred a Ziggs from this mid lane, but of course you don't have Saros. I think that's actually a combo which DFM pulled out last spring. For a point. Oh no, it was versus Senna. They had the Ziggs, you counter pick into it. It's like, oh yeah, okay, really big stuff. And if you can just nuke them down. But I think V3, between the Urgot and the Varus, just didn't quite pilot them the way that I see those champions working in this draft.
I would definitely agree with you on that. I mean, this Varus felt really weird. They picked it really early on in the draft, which was something they did twice until way later in their series, where they actually get the W. This is to be honest, until we see the win way later, this Varus just never looks good. I've not been impressed with this, and this is Hollow's pocket pick. This is a comfort pick champion, and I really do wonder where the mental is for Hollow now, because you can't win on your favorite champion. You can't win on the champion you can always go back to. That must definitely affect the player, and I mean, thankfully he was able to run it back. Let's go on to the second series, because the second game felt far more what I was kind of expecting coming into this series. This was just V3 esports going, well, we're going to get a lead and we're going to snowball it, and it also might have had one of the best casting I've seen from Initia1ise. So I mean, that also is a pretty good part of it. So I mean, I don't know. Yeah, you deserve it.
Good one.
May I introduce you to the great Baron Throw of 2K21? Holy moly! I'm sure Adaro's got his own thoughts, but I just want to point out, this was a point where V3 had or rather, the Hawks had slowly been bleeding out. Appermen on this Jace had a really crap time at the Gnar top side. It was all going a little bit wrong. I think, was this the game where they lost 2 turrets top to the Herald push as well? So, Jace had lost 2 turrets and had died once under tower, or possibly twice under tower. Sorry, it was just the once. I think it probably would have been. Anyway, it was a bad game. And things were getting a little rough. And basically, they managed to catch.
You're right. You're right. It is two. It is two.
Yeah. So at this point, they get a couple picks in the mid lane, and it's fantastic. Just gone 20 minutes. We've been losing this game, but we're now a 5v3. We could just take Baron. Cook. Flash Stridebreaker ults all 4 of them into the wall. They murdered a lot of them. Take the Baron and kill the last man as well, running him down. Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Anyway, it was a really damn cool ult, and the game is just done. Like it's literally it's one of those things. If it's solo queue, you FF then. It's all over.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Cog ruined them all.
It was the kind of play where they found a pick onto the Jinx, and this again, Jinx is kind of a pick which is cropping up more and more. But they found a pick onto the Jinx, and like, ooh, okay, maybe they can start Baron. They started up, and they get a pick onto Rhino. They peel off and they get that pick onto Rhino. And then you see a almost full rage bar.
Pick, by the way,
huh?
That was all Corporal.
Oh yeah, no,
yeah,
I think he went through the hook with the ult, so also on the set. So he ignored the CC, he gets onto that too, and he just slammed onto him, just did suplex the heck out of him. But yeah, so then you see this Gnar walking up and like, okay, so we don't have settle anymore. We just use that. We don't have a number of other key abilities too. We don't actually have a tank besides our set, so we can't like bulwark him off. We don't want to commit Udyr to this either because he's our jungler. We need the smite. And yet this Gnar has almost full mega to the point where, you know, if you cast your W ult, you automatically transform. And he has flash and he has Stridebreaker. And he just absolutely wombo combos the hell out of them. And then obviously Ace is on the Galio too, so he follows up. And like it's the Venn diagram of doom. Everyone just gets absolutely mashed.
Well, I mean, the whole other issue is the Hawks are actually getting forced into getting this Baron down even quicker because Muujin is like a fish in a barrel and just shooting spears from over the other side. So the Hawks actually can't get out of the Baron pit because Muujin's literally standing on the other side, just throwing spears repeatedly. And then you've just got Ace and Koko going, you're not getting out of here. And if we get a good opportunity, it was great for the V3, really.
I mean, V3 punished well, but still the Hawks should peel off when they kill Rhino. As soon as you see the state of the Gnar bar, you should just get away from that. Because, yes, spears are coming in through the pit, but those are just spears. It's not like it's going to be, like, deleting you in the same way that the Gnar is. What that really means is that you've got a
health got really low.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I think that the big thing for me is that if you land a spear onto the Baron, there's just a chance that he just hops in and steals it. It's just more of a steal opportunity, right? Particularly because Nidalee does have a lot of execute damage if it lands the spear. You can just keep chucking spears in and also you can use the mark to keep tracking the HP of the Baron too. It's very hard to deny Nidalee vision of a Baron. So V3 just absolutely punished them. I just think that it's a bit of a moment of madness from the Hawks committing to the rest of that Baron. I think they got a bit over themselves, kind of saying, all right, we're 1-0 up, we're winning this game right now, we've got some really good picks, really good position, and then it all falls apart there.
It's like a 3v5. Just outplay the Gnar ult, it'll be fine. Nah,
nope.
Game is done.
It becomes incredibly different if the Hawks don't do that, or if they actually secure the Baron, but V3 still get the ult, because then V3 don't have the opportunity to push through with everything else. It means Hollow doesn't come back up and is just able to remove a bunch of turrets, which he does in the bottom mid lane. And I mean, V3 just literally get the clamp and just, well, it's not even the clamp, it's the claws. They've come out and they're gone at that point.
It's
the Toy Story, the aliens.
Oh, right. I was going
that's an older reference, but it checks out.
I was with Futurama with the clamps.
Oh, that's yes, fair play. Yeah.
Solid references, both of you. It's okay.
Oh, absolutely. I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I forgot about that. I mean, gentlemen, let's go on to game number 3 in this series before we get hung up on references of obscurity to maybe some of our audience who did not grow up with the same TV as us. Game number 3 was another one for the Hawks, and again, this came partly through the Senna in this bot lane, but also Tussle having another solid game, and the Hawks really do seem to live and die by this Senna and Tussle doing well, and by proxy, the rest of the team just kind of go along. Now, there are a lot of things we can talk about from the side of obviously V3 in this one, because this was a pretty roller coaster of a game. There was a Baron for V3 in this game. There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I think a lot of what this one was... I mean, I can start a little bit, if only because the interesting one here is, once again, Zenit gets a hold of the Senate. which is a big deal because Zenit on Senna is a very different beast to a lot of other carries. He's very, very, very good at that champion. I also think Senna's just really strong. It was another one of the Poke Varus games which kind of was better, but still not. But again, didn't work out necessarily the way they were hoping it would. And beyond that, Dasher was on Lucian versus Cog on Tristana in the solo lanes. And it was basically, how much gold can I get onto my solo lane AD carry versus yours? And Appamen played weak side Nart versus Cog so well. They tried to dive him 3 times. And in that, they basically managed to go 1 for 1, and that was very lucky it wasn't in the end, up being 2 for 1 across those dice, because one time when the tower executed Cog one time. So, like, they were very lucky. Well, it wasn't even a negative trade, but the fact they put so much attention between a Tristana, a Galio, and an Udyr all trying to kill a lone mini Nart under tower and could not pull it off for the whole game was a bit frustrating for V3 fans. Whereas you look at the other side, Dasher and Tussle, Dasher in particular on this Lucian, just steamrolled mid. Ace was forever at 20% HP.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of Lucian into Galio. You need to be really on point with your jungle pressure to have presence in that lane. But the thing about Galio is that he kind of needs a bit of presence in lane to then spread it elsewhere. Not dissimilar to a Twisted Fate. So Twisted Fate's got better wave clear than a Galio most of the time because obviously he's got ranged auto attacks. He can finish off the last kind of creeps. And then also he has a ranged stun in his gold card as opposed to Galio needing to walk up to disengage, which is a little counterintuitive. He needs to hit his taunt and then back out or something similar to that. So Dasher, this is his second ever Lucian game. He has had it banned away from him so damn much throughout the entire 2020, even though the Hawks were like a last place roster in spring. He had it banned away from massive amounts. So he finally gets his hands on this again and had a pretty good showing of it. I mean, I don't think it was a perfect Lucian performance, but between him and the rest of the team, it was, a really fun team fighting performance. This got pretty close to a lot of points. This is the game we had the pause in, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we had a really big pause when we thought, oh, bugger, is it going to be a bug? It turns out it wasn't. It was just a connectivity issue thing. But we were sat there like, oh my gosh, someone just died around Baron in a big fight. That we could be sat here for half an hour to an hour. Luckily, it wasn't the case. But lots of drama anyway.
Thankfully not.
Yeah.
No, this was the moment where obviously we're not quite sure if Appamen's ultimate on that Gnar did actually go through. As it actually turned out, it never missed. And actually the whole call was because Zenit DC'd. Which was something that you brought up, Nymaera, as potentially something, because you were like, that's really weird, he's just standing still. It's like, he's just standing still and he's DC'd. That's peculiar. Though I was like, but the replay feature, anything can happen half the time, so hey-ho. But then I was quickly reminded by myself that it's like, this is all live, Alex, so shut up. And it's not what our used to be, where it's about 20 minutes in the past. This gentlemen, I mean, this was a game that we thought was going to be the Hawks' favor. They got to a 3k lead at 23 minutes in, and outside of that minor faux pas around the Baron pit, it still felt like it was pretty convincing from the side of the Hawks.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably fair. I think it's another one of those games where Dasher had control, and they always look better when Dasher gets to play the game on front foot. I think Appamen played weak side exceptionally well on the Gnar. I think also really helped. Zenit on that Senna. I think it's just this was like a perfect storm of a Hawks draft. Like, Dasher gets Lucian, Zenit gets Senna, Appamen on the Gnar outplays like 3v1 multiple times, and then Tussle is kind of playing front foot as well, because Tussle from behind or in a losing game state is non-existent to worse than non-existent.
I think the thing for me is that this showed that Dasher kind of has like a secondary carry pick besides the Azir, which is good in on this patch. I think that I mean, Azir has even been, well, I think he's been nerfed like a little bit since then. I'm trying to remember if he was nerfed on this patch actually. But just having a pick where the Hawks were like, yeah, we can play around mid actually. We can play around the mid 2v2, and the fact that actually I think on the whole, the Hawks 2v2 in the mid jungle 2v2 outplayed within that isolated matchup. When it kind of got to the team fights and stuff, obviously that bit where the champions which they picked kind of really started to shine. V3 had some really big team fighting performances, but particularly, I mean, I think we saw a couple of 2v2s where like actually the Hawks just straight up outplayed Mugen and Ace, and that's not something I expected coming into the series. But yeah, having Dasher kind of showing this performance, being like, yeah, okay, there's another pick you have to respect. It was big for the drafts.
It definitely made an impact, and sadly, Tristana, or Cog's Tristana, he's tried a few spicy picks. Now, this is number 2. Obviously, the Urgot was in game number 1, didn't work out as they wanted, didn't get ahead, didn't really actually have an impressive time versus Gnar. Actually, if anything, I would say Appamen actually had a pretty fun time in that lane for a lot of it. Yeah, he might have been down on CS, but I think what's something big about this Tristana is Appamen actually got ahead of Cog in the early game, which was not how that lane's meant to go. Tristana is meant to bully Gnar out, and the fact that Gnar before 50 minutes was ahead on CS, that's not where it needs to be, especially with the amount of dives and pressure that had been put around Cog and Appamen just showing up. I mean, obviously, it really showed that the weak side turned into the strong side for the Hawks there, and that's how they were able to get 2-1 up in this series, which meant all of our predictions were dead. All of them were dead. Nothing worked out. Everything is a lie. What do I know is real? Well, game number 4 rather, with V3 and the Hawks. Well, it kind of came back to me a little bit. But there were some exciting picks here. Tristana wasn't in the top lane, and there was a Zilean mid for Ace, gentlemen.
So,
yes, there was.
Yeah, so in this game, you look at this draft and you're like, all right, okay, you're trying to basically set up so much terrain and anything to kind of get between the Jinx and the Hecarim as possible, and they just couldn't do enough. They just couldn't do enough. This was the first time, I think, and I'm sure you'll talk about this as well, like, this is, the bot lane of E3 had been, like, manhandled this series. I think that Rhino, particularly in the first 3 games, was not good. Gets himself onto a Rel, has a really good game. Between him and Mugen on the Hecarim, both of them had much better standout performances. And Zenit just couldn't find a free place to stand, really. That's the story of the game from my end of things. Like, it was the Hawks kind of in this arms race to try and disengage the enemy team from the Jinx, and they just couldn't do it.
Asher did so many attempts to try and get away from it, and it's like, oh god, that's never good when you're streamer shuffling away from the enemy side, right?
The thing about Azir, it's like, you have this choice in every... Well, so you have a choice in every team fight of, do I want to be backline DPS or burst engage? And engaging into a Renekton, which can cancel your slide and glide with empowered W, because that stops dashes. One of the reasons he's really good against Camille, as opposed to also destroying shields like a passive shield. Hecarim being able to ignore your ultimate, being very good in close range because of his continued DPS, having ghosts and stuff like that. And also having Rel, who you get close to her or her tethered target, she just blip, stunned. There's really, really not many options where you can start shuffling in. You need to be using that ult defensively and trying to keep range. They just couldn't do that again.
Cog was able to slice and dice through, and something that I noticed before this with my pre-game prep was obviously Appamen is 2-1 on this Ornn. But I don't like seeing Appamen on tanks, especially Ornn specifically. And then, well, I'm partly using this to lean into the into the final series of this best of 5. But this first one wasn't great showing, and Appamen felt kind of just a non-impact in this one. Initially, I want to get some of your thoughts on this match.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because I actually think that this was just a really good draft from V3 as well. Like, I really liked this draft. I think, when did they pick the Zilean? Was it last pick? I don't have the pick.
They hit it. I can actually get that. It was on second rotation. Yeah, it was Zilean and also blue side 4 and 5. It was Zilean. First pick. Hecarim.
Oh, Hecarim, because it was left unbanned. Okay, I was like, well, this is the thing. I look at those picks and I'm like, how do they all get on the same team? Surely one of them were first pick. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and the great response for the Hawks, for V3 here, was that they went immediately Thresh Jinx, which is obviously a really good lane for the side of the Hawks, but then immediately Rel Tristana gets picked up by V3, and it's like,
that's pretty good too.
I feel like
Thresh is fine into Rel, but like, you have to play the plays super well.
Which Corporal did for the first few 5-10 minutes,
they played it in lane. They played I mean, Zenit got ahead in lane. You know, they were playing that just fine. But then there was the gank bot where it was actually hollow some way. Somehow they got the kill because Ace turns up with a Zilean, and basically Zilean being able to invalidate the first kill and stop Jinx getting excited is huge. And also, Zilean plus Hecarim just makes Hecarim really good, because Hecarim is a great pick, assuming you have other people in your team to either dive with you or empower you to dive alone. So it's the reason things like Orianna... Shen. Orianna's great because you have the shockwave that can follow, dissonance speeds you up. Like, that's great. Zilean can literally just let's do the time warp again, respawn you if you die, and also give you massively increased move speed on Hecarim, whose warpath passive means he does more damage with, guess what? Move speed. And it's like, okay, so you've got a really good combo there. Hecarim, Renekton go diving in with Rel as well. You've got the two Horsemen of the Apocalypse combo. You've got bombs flying on top. You've got the speed ups. It's just a great combo. And it's really hard for the Hawk to disengage from. Like, basically, Apperman needs to play like a god on Ornn. And Tussle needs to slap the horse as quickly as he can before he gets to ult. And it also means these guys can't go forwards. Well, the other means these guys can't go forwards. Corporal can't go looking for picks. Tussle can't go looking for picks very easily, because doing so exposes you for everyone. The other team's going, right, time to go on the Jinx. Like, it's so difficult.
But then I can't think of a single champion that saves the Hawks draft here in Apperman. Like, I just don't know what you pick when you see the enemy in the last rotation go Renekton, Zilean. I just don't know.
That's the kind of game where I'm like, actually, maybe bring out the Mordekaiser again.
And just put the horse in the death chamber. Yeah.
There is another champion which apparently good on PBE right now, which is Yorick, but that's got to see if the PBE changes make it through.
Changes. Plus the fact don't take aggro or whatever.
So there's a guy called Crinsey I talked to in the German university scene, because I do some obviously UK uni stuff, and like he is a Yorick main, and he's like, he is convinced the reason he's never made Diamond is because he's a Yorick player.
Well, he won't have that excuse for much longer.
Step it up, buddy.
If those buffs come through on 24/7 for Yorick, no, I think those quality of life kids for Yorick are just straight buffs.
I actually think that Mordekaiser wouldn't have been awful, because again, you can't play through topside as V3 at that point, really, because you can't really go into that 1v2. And the first person in, you just like yoink them out. They don't get the Zilean ult, so they can die in there. And also you can kind of like, which means that you can take an important piece of the puzzle out. Either way, it doesn't. One of the problems with Rel as a champion and balancing Rel is, and there's a reason why Rel is something like a 75% win rate, something like that in LEC, but like the highest high pick rate champion in modern history, effectively, of that kind of presence anyway, is because you just cannot deny her engage. You just can't.
Yeah.
You just cannot stop her from doing a thing, particularly because you can't like flash everything, but you can something like flash WR midway through flight, but you can also E midway through flight to make sure. Yeah, you can animation cancel your E and your R to make sure that everything lands, and it means that you're just like a much more reliable, much more tanky Leona, which is nuts. So particularly when you're trying to stand there as the exactly, I think that Jinx was it's hard to kind of like give Jinx a free space to hit anyway, but particularly since Apperman, as you're saying, doesn't have the best hit history on this champion. Even last year when he was playing it in 2020, I was there like, I don't really like seeing him on this. I'm not a fan. He had to play well. He got a bit smashed in lane, got even more smashed in team fights. There was that teleport bot lane too, where he came in about half HP, didn't really do very much.
Super weird.
And then like Cog kind of snowballs out of control from that point. I was sat there, I'm like, this is just bizarre.
The one thing I will say is, I think we've been seeing a lot more. If someone first picks Hecarim, you first rotation on red side the Skarner in response rather than a Nudir. And I actually think Skarner here might have been a better call in that you might force some QSSs. You've got Skarner Thresh to pull people out of range rather than just having Udyr stun someone at the front line. You can at least pull someone out of position. So even if they're reviving at an awful point. It's still tanky. You can still throw out other CC. You can still run chem tank. Like, it just also means that actually, if you're jumping into a Skarner as something like the Tristana, who's most of your DPS, even if she gets the Chrono Shift on her, if she is basically stunned for 3 seconds because she's caught under the Impale, like, she's not doing DPS, and you've got an Azir and a Jinx. Like, as long as one of them survives while the Tristana is not doing damage, then you can turn it around. So I wonder whether that might have been the right pick rather than Udyr, considering you knew that the first pick was Hecarim anyway.
It's definitely an option open to them. They decided to red pick 3, the Udyr, and we've seen Tussle play this Skarner. But then To be honest, gentlemen,
Is
this
most played,
is
actually? Or is that Hachimecha?
no.
Hachimecha,
It's Hachimecha.
Yeah.
Tussle's most played champion is Lee Sin at 57 games.
Funnily enough, I actually have Hachimecha's stats like on my second screen for some reason because I just was flicking through tabs, just looking for one website, and I just saw Skarner. I'm like, yes, Skarner is Tussle's most played. Anyway, ignore me. Normally,
next series that we're yet to cover yet. Let's go on to this final match, gentlemen. And this was if you can't say game number 2 is the most decisive, because there was at least that option of maybe the Hawks get the pick and they rotate it back away and it becomes far more of an even game. Game number 5 was the just one-sided affair in my opinion. On the side of V3, where they just slapped the Hawks around 3 ways till Sunday. And I don't think the Hawks drafted horribly. It was just V3 were just on it more than anything else. And it felt like the Hawks had almost kind of surrendered this game in the first 5 minutes. It felt like a bit. Even with them getting early advantages. It's weird.
I won't give them. I think I'll give them some more fairness than that. In fairness, I think part of it was they made some choices specifically around what they were going to do with Tussle, and it was fine decisions to make. And they basically said, "Look, I'm going to trade first Drake and first Herald over, in trade for Muujin on the Graves, getting more individual advantages in my jungle, and I'll still get some camps back occasionally once I've finished these objectives. But the trade is basically this Graves gets free farm, and Muujin just."
He was getting triple camps. It was
he put he had a 19k damage game as a jungler. He was
that's pretty nice actually.
Matching solo laners
nuts.
very easily. He was ahead of everybody on the enemy team aside from
Stride
Zenit,
Breaker Graves, by the way.
Yeah, Stride Breaker Graves just got to hop into everything or hop away from everything.
Second most damage on his team, which is third most damaging game, only behind Zenit's Ezreal, which I think had already been said. So I will shut up.
And I thought and then Hollow was on the Varus again, but he went on hit. I think that's better into 3 tanks. It was
not on hit
again for men.
It's long since the Rage Blade era.
Don't play Varus Hollow.
This game was
fine in this game. This game was genuinely good.
This is the one game I'd be like, all right.
That was legit. Yeah.
It's still a bit of a.
It took him how many games to get here? And it wasn't even
damage on his team.
Yeah, but he still got less damage than Zenit.
Yeah.
No, but that's also.
But then that's also an Ezreal.
Ezreal.
And actually, speaking of that, so if there's one of these random things I've kind of latched onto and kind of not let go of, it's the fact that I just don't trust Zenit to carry so often. He was in that. So there were a couple of games where he's kind of really popped off. That one Nymaera game versus CGA, even then, almost didn't carry because he was shut down so many times in the team fights where he had that lead. There was the Xayah when he had the death ball,
those.
And that was the tiebreaker match, right? The one which decided their position in. So that would have been versus Burning Core, where that Xayah was, in fairness, really, really good. And then there were the Senna games, right? But it's there's 2 oddball games and then Senna. If you take away the Senna, we've seen him fail on Ezreal before in terms of getting early gold. I think he was a 5-kill Ezreal at some point, and he was mispositioned a lot this game in my eyes. I look at Zen and okay, I don't think it was egregious, but when you are the person who's got the lead on your team on a champion where you are a Korean import playing Ezreal, Korean Ezreals are a thing of legend. Having that kind of game where you're actually against the Graves and the Galio and the Gnar particularly, you can definitely kite them about. You can definitely show them what's what. And ignore the scoreboard and all the zeals. He sold them on the Nexus, by the way. But but I think that Zenit, for me, I just needed a bit more of that efficiency in using the gold if it's been funneled to you. And it felt like in this game, particularly around the mid game, Zenit just didn't do that for me.
I want to double down with you as well, Alex, on this one, especially taking away those Senna games, because I would argue that lane was fully carried through Corporal. His positioning in the lane and farming effectively, getting competitive CS versus bad matchups as a fucking Maokai in one of those matches, and then still being far more impactful. And then guess what? You're a Senna. If you can't front to back as an AD carry as a Senna, you have no chance in the LJL. And the fact that he's basically getting handheld by his support going, I'll play your tank, your front line, and I'll farm for you. Just hold back, please. And then in team fights, you just stand behind me. I'll be honest, I'm really not sold on Zenit. I really agree with you, Alex. I think if you take away those center games, what do we get left with? Not much.
I'd need to VOD review a lot more specifically around what Zenit is doing to like have a more coherent opinion on it. But particularly, it's just been very visible to me in the 2 Ezreal games he's got fed on that he's not really been putting out the amount of threat which I'd expect with the amount of gold he's been put through. Again, it's not egregious, but there is definitely a point where I'm sat there like the way that the Hawks win this game is by Zenit playing through his advantage, and they didn't really manage that. Particularly, there was one fight around Bot Dragon where he kind of pops over the wall and kind of walks back around on because he's kind of like in enemy territory at that point. But like he just walks straight into Cog at that point, and he just kind of like walks up into him. And it's like, oh, I die now, and he like it just felt like he didn't quite fight the fights in the way that I would like him to.
Yeah, like so I don't know whether I
play devil's
entirely
advocate on
agree.
the other side of that.
So in terms of, I think. So
It's like 2v1
I'll throw him a little bit of a bone for this game particularly. I agree the first Ezreal game we saw in the split, not great from him. This one, I think I give him a little bit more of a pass because basically, like his team had fallen apart at this point. Dasher and Tussle had been eviscerated. Apperman couldn't hit an ult for the life of him. Corporal was going in, but he was the only one who was kind of doing it, and he was dying for doing that. And like, so basically, Zenit, and at this point, everyone else is dying around him, and he's basically trying to 1v5. And his decision as a player is basically like, look, I'm gonna play this as close to the absolute edge as I can, not play safe, but play kind of a bit more aggressive to try and at least
control aggression, though, is my problem.
Well, like, and I understand. The point is, with the rest of his team falling apart, I wonder whether the decision making is basically like, look, I have got to play more risky to even have a chance of getting in this game because everyone else is so far behind. And I understand that decision; it didn't work out. But
there's a difference between that.
I understand why he's doing. Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure it was all misplay because I still think
no, it wasn't. But there were a couple of big moments in the big team fights. Where I'm like, you shouldn't be there. Why are you there?
Yeah.
I look back at the last couple of seconds. I'm like, he made a mistake.
Sure.
And I think the perfect point for me for that exact thing was around this third dragon, which was first Ocean Drake on the Rift. I'll be honest, he just played. Yes, he got the kill on Muujin. Great. They still get the dragon. They still got everything. He's getting this after the fact. And this is also after the fact that 2 members of his team have also died. And I don't know, I just felt like he had like 4 or 5 kills before coming into this fight. And he just felt really unimpactful. He felt like it wasn't important in that game, regardless of him having 4 kills going into that fight. Which
I think it was my point. I guess my point is it's very difficult to look impactful when the rest of your team is literally 0-3, 0-5, 0-4, 0-1.
No. But this was way before that. That was before it got the wheels had completely come off, right? This is the wheels coming off.
The wheels were kind of already off by that point. Like he was the only one with kills, and like Corporal had a kill on the Alistair, and everyone else was already in the dumpster.
So I mean, I think the thing for me is that I look at the enemy team comp from V3 and I'm like, you can absolutely carry that as an Ezreal. If you manage to keep space against, particularly Ace and Muujin, you can do a lot of work, like a lot. And it felt like it wasn't Zenit putting out consistent damage. He had to like kind of play himself out of some dangerous situations which he put himself into, rather than play himself into a killing situation, right? Yeah. And I think that Reiner again had a better game this time around, and also the fact that Hollow was much more on point. I think this is the game where like Hollow was like on point with his ults because he was catching Zenit a couple of times. But I think that Zenit should not be in a position to get caught by Varus ults when you have E up and stuff like that. You should be. Yeah. There were a couple of times when like Hollow and Zenit were like actually trading like health bars with each other. I'm like, this absolutely favors V3. I want to give props to Hollow for that as well. Actually, I suppose on the other side of it, knowing that I don't mind going 80% of my health down as long as Zenit does the same thing. But Zenit shouldn't be opting into those trades. There are much better play patterns to like wail on Ace or Reiner or Cog as they jump in, because you should have better DPS at that point in the game when you have 5 kills on the Ezreal.
Like I guess, but like, so not that I disagree with you. I guess absolutely. I'm just saying I think it's also exceptionally difficult to play safe when actually your front line's melting or not there. And also, like, it's
yeah,
like,
but there's a difference between like standing and auto queuing and standing on the edge of a taunt range and like walking around a wall when you know that a Gnar is mega on the other side of that wall and like dying to it. Like, there's sometimes it's just like that's not a decision, that's a mistake.
Yeah, and I'll also say, like, there was like some great plays from the likes of Hollow and stuff, like flashing over the thick walls to get like multi-man auto attacks with the Hurricane to kill off 3 people. Like, there's only so much you can do to disengage.
I mean, this team fight going in. I mean, the third dragon, which I was talking about, the kills were, it was 30 to 35k gold. Like, V3 were 3k gold, but the kill difference was only 2 kills. Like, the fact
they're
is,
still ahead 4k nearly.
Yeah, but like
half.
V3 had done that outside of getting kills. Like, they were just playing the map and doing micro stuff better. And the fact,
exactly,
and yeah, a lot of it was
like,
and
Muujin,
like
the
Hawks got to engage onto V3 with 2 of their members being around the back of the pit and not even being anywhere near them. The Hawks get on top of them first, and then the Hawks are still able to turn it because they can just slap them with a wallet. Like, I get your point. I absolutely get your point, but Zenit just felt very unimpactful. And to be honest, I think this is he felt unimpactful this game. He's not the worst player though in my eyes on the Hawks.
I think the reason
that goes to a very special man though.
Yeah, I think the reason I kind of go a little bit deeper onto this Zenit's point is like it's kind of a recurring trend, and like I said, it's kind of like a thread which I've kind of like refused to let go of, I suppose. So again, don't take this as Zenit is the reason they lost this game. I think the reason I'm like Zenit is the reason they could have won this game, and he didn't quite perform to that. I felt like if anyone could do, particularly when it got to that mid game, it was that Ezreal with the lead. But yes, other things went horribly wrong.
So I want to take us on a little bit of a tangent here, gentlemen. But it's important regarding this series, as it's something I said to you both after the whole series before we all decided to peace out and take a bit of R&R after it. I said to you both, the wins that V3 had felt incredibly convincing, but the losses they had felt very drawn out. And this is something that I'm kind of the point of, well, when V3 won, they won. Like, there wasn't really much of a question after the first 10 minutes or so. I felt like V3 were probably in the driver's seat for most of the wins they had. Now, the losses, game number 1 was far more of a Hawks thing. And game number 3, do we just go Senna, Tussle, it's just what the Hawks are better at doing versus V3, and some of the cool stuff that V3 were trying with that Tristana top and the Varus AD carry and the Urgot as well. Like, were those things not working? I'm just interested in your opinions on those.
I think that game 2 is the exception to the rule there, because I think the Baron play is what really turned that game. So before that, I think that actually that was a very competitive game. I don't think that was snowballed out of control. I think that actually, until that big player Baron happened, because of the picks beforehand, actually I'd favor the Hawks coming out of that in some ways. Kind of similar to the way that CJ kind of threw that one game versus Sengoku around the Baron too. And it's like, oh yeah, game 1, actually, I think CJ were in a winning position up until that happened. I think the other games, yeah, I think particularly games 4 and 5, V3 just stomped, right? I think that their drafts perform much better. I think that their early game improved a lot. And it did kind of fit more of that style that you were talking about, that kind of the narrative. Oh yeah, you get past the early game and suddenly V3 just kind of win every fight and win the game. I think game 2 is the exception to that, though.
Shailesh, your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think there's probably some truth to that. I also think that when V3, you're saying V3 like losing slower, I think that's partly Hawks not closing faster too. There's an element of that.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
Lower tier teams, like, even if they have turned up to play and actually, won some games pretty well, honestly, and we're competing in the early mid games for a number of the other ones as well. Like, as we said, that the Jinx game, they got ahead of the early lane. They saw that was at the one where they threw at the Baron as well. Well, like, there were games, right, where they could have won elsewhere as well. But something that does set aside great teams or teams that are really on it, the G2s, the C9s, whatever of the leagues in the world, is their ability to close out with a lead. And
yeah, that's damn one.
Like, I don't think Hawks are at that level, right? And I think that tends to show in how long it takes people to close out games. Yeah, damn what great call. Sorry,
yeah. Yeah. And then I was like, wait a second, they've just lost to Gen G, so I'm like, I've not watched the series, so exactly. I don't want to go too deep on that one. I mean, gentlemen, we predicted 3-0, both me and Nymaera, and a 3-1 from Initia1ise. We expected there to be an opportunity for where something would happen. And it didn't come to be. Our predictions were completely wrong. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on why do we think this game went as it is? Obviously, we know that V3 and Kolkog, they hinted towards in their interview, in their post-game winners interview, which thank you to Star Sapphire for translating some of those stuff over that was said. It really does help us actually improve our coverage of the region. Obviously, they were trying some spicy picks, some unique stuff. We'd seen this from Kolkog in the top lane. Where do we think this is going? What do we think could be done differently? Like, is V3 kind of like almost out of everything? Is the hat almost fully played? Or if they still got some stuff maybe you think that they can show? Kolkog hinted towards it, but like, how much really though?
Why was this series closer? I think part of it's tussle. I think a large part of it's tussle actually, because we expected tussle to be like a 0 factor. And he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually surprisingly present during the early games and made things a little bit harder for Mugen and Ace to kind of have that same ability to impact the map that they had done like before that. I think that V3 moving forward from this, because of course now we have to look at them and obviously you're asking the question of, is this just V3 kind of like consigned to death versus Sengoku now?
Or you can also look at it as, was this the reason that Sengoku didn't pick the Hawks?
Yeah.
Both angles are viable here.
Yeah. I think I think particularly for Sengoku, I think it's because the bot lane of the Hawks is much more solid than CGA's, and I think that they play through strong bot side well. And that's kind of something that that fits in my narrative of Sengoku anyway.
Okay, and I think also as well, like there is an element of like, especially if you are trying something new for V3, like Kolkog put out in his interview, like we were upset when what we prepared didn't work, so I'm kind of relieved we won. Basically, what the translation amounts to.
Yep.
If you have prepped stuff and it just doesn't work on stage, you kind of got two ways you go. You either double down or you go completely back to basics. They kind of went a bit more back to basics, a bit more front to back, with the aside of the Zillion Hecarim, which is a bit of V3 flavor on a front to back. That combo is disgusting.
They were pushed to it as well.
I know. But actually they ran the Tristan on the top, and AppMen just outplayed them. Like that's kind of one of those things. Like, okay, is that us? Is that like actually what we prepped being wrong, or is it something we try again and it comes out to a different result? And like that can be quite difficult to pass. So part of it, I think, is actually V3 being a little bit unhappy with how what they'd prepped and where it went wrong for whatever reason that is. And obviously Hawks turn up to play a little bit more. I think on the other side for Sengoku, what they prepped worked out just fine. And that's always a big deal, right? Actually, if you spend your time prepping stuff, and we've seen this with V3 as well, right? They have started to go towards slightly trickier compositions to execute, which again, I am all for teams trying to do it, and actually V3 have shown they've got nearly there on a lot of this, like with their 1-3-1 split push Tristana stop stuff, it's nearly there. The question is whether nearly there will be absolutely there in 2 weeks' time against Sengoku, who are much better than the Hawks.
So I want to use what you've both just set up, to go into our next series to prep for. But before we do, we've kind of already touched on it, but let's talk about the patch that we're playing on, as this is something that actually came up in an interview with Perks with Travis Gafford, where Perks was extremely upset the fact that they are playing their whole playoffs on patch 11.5. He was very disappointed. Obviously, he had a superb 3-0, but he's incredibly frustrated the fact that they couldn't wait an extra week like LEC, and the fact that they're playing on 11.5, which means they're not playing on the MSI patch, which is going to be 11.6. And this is something that we are also experiencing here in the LJL, and I want to kind of gauge your thoughts as we prepare for potentially one of the two teams from this Juggernaut match will be going into the finals, gentlemen, and one of these teams could be a legitimate representative. I think we all might have our favorites on who we think could be representing the LJL at the mid-season invitational. the thing is, our team is playing on the wrong patch, and we don't want to. Well, I personally don't want to see a patch change halfway through the fucking split again. Not doing that again.
Well,
I mean,
it changed
like,
three
but-
freaking
but-
patches
but
last time. Remember? It's
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if it's a one patch shift and the teams are okay with it, that's the format. You can argue one way or another. On one hand, the team that eventually wins is going to be on the wrong patch for MSI, which sucks. On the other hand, actually switching patches mid playoffs, is that just saying you've just got to be as good at prepping as everybody else? And there's 2 weeks break between these two game days anyway. So what deal with it? Or is it actually, you just need to keep it on a level playing field for the entire playoffs to make sure everyone's at the same standards? I mean, exactly. The dream would be come in on 11.6, stay on 11.6.
I mean, the fact that when Sengoku and CGA play, 5 weeks later is when the finals are, and that's kind of awkward to be playing on the same patch, right?
Exactly. So at which point I understand why you put a patch shift in there, even if I don't like it. My issue then is, well, if you're getting a patch shift because your playoff format is too long, you maybe need to narrow your playoff bracket window.
Yeah, so I think that it's important to note that that interview with Travis Gafford was multiple factors why Perks was dissatisfied, because it's also about scrim culture and the infrastructure.
Solo queue as well. Yeah.
Solo queue, kind of keys into that whole infrastructure thing, I suppose, in one way or another. But yeah, I mean, I think that the LJL has had at least decent ability to have geographically relevant scrim partners in terms of the VCS, some of the LCK teams too. Heck, I don't even know if they've been doing any scrims with LPL teams at points, but we definitely know they've been doing scrims with teams like Flash and Garm last year from the VCS. I'm looking through patch 11.6, and yeah, there are significant changes. Stuff like Silas being a big factor now, actually. Silas,
big for the LJL.
Which is big for the LJL, particularly when you got players like... I mean, maybe that's what brings them over the edge. Maybe that's Aria just popping off on Silas versus everyone. Maybe that's it. Woo! Yeah, but like, there's a whole load of like quite key things which have been nerfed in terms of some of the healing items and like, Blade the Rune King. Well, that's less relevant on some people, but like... and then there's also Jinzao changes. Who knows whether that's going to be a factor coming into MSI, particularly because of the huge E dash rage. If you hit that W, then yes, you're going to get dived on from Nidalee Spear range away. But yeah, it's a very nuanced question. I think that I don't think I'd like to see a patch change. I don't think in mid playoffs. I don't think that's worth it. Given what we went through in spring last year when we had effectively lockdown was instated across the world. And we had such a delay of something like a 3 to 4 week break where we had to like completely fumble around for content on the podcast. Being like, hey, let's just goof off for a bit on podcast. And then we had a 3 patch change. It went from like 10.5 to 10.8 or something. It was absolutely nuts. And that ruined playoffs in a lot of ways. Like it completely it's like, what? This is a separate playoffs now. Do we just have 2 champions, one coming from 10.5, one from 10.8? Particularly because we saw a mirror matchup again. I mean, it's a good narrative in some ways, right? But it's just very frustrating as a viewer. It's been like, why couldn't we just play this on the same damn patch again?
Well, I mean, the point, like, you see, the thing is, you see the argument is what it's been like. It's like a month between playoff games at that point.
No.
Well, the players don't get to practice.
Just sucks.
You understand? It just sucks. So the thing is, like, much like with this, like, I understand why you put a patch change in if it happens. I don't like it, but I also don't like it if you're on the same patch from ages ago because players can't practice on the right patch. Anyway.
But then I always want to use the logic that you were using earlier, Initia1ise, which is just say, let's condense this, let's not do the... or if you want, or I will be honest, if you want it to be this long, and I've said this before on the podcast, and I'm going to say it again, have a fucking losers bracket, make another thing, and force us to have longer games. Just give us more games if you want it to be this long for some fucking reason. I don't think it should be
instead of 1.
Right, I don't think it should be this long, by the way. I completely agree with both of my co-hosts here. Yeah. It shouldn't be this long. But if you're going to, give us a bunch more matches, because one, it's more content for us. It's also more to talk about, so we win in that department. And 2, the viewers win, and there's more games for the players. It's like, well, if you're going to drag it out, give us something. But I don't think a loser bracket is correct, and I completely agree with the points that were raised against me last time.
Yeah,
it's just something. It's just
like it is one of many possible solutions to the problems that we've got. I think a lot of it comes down to just the LJL scheduling has just been a bit of a torrid affair for a little while. And I mean, in fact, there might be an issue for this next series, which we'll get into it. But like, it's just more in the saga of LJL scheduling has been not great for us in terms of like, why are they doing stuff midweek? Why is it inconsistent on their game day? Why are the playoffs like spring was particularly bad. Summer was, we could deal with it. It was all right. But yeah, even just having eight game days is a bit archaic for League Esports.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge basic fact, right?
Yeah.
Like, which other league plays this many games
in one day? None.
and actually does it in one day? It's like, well, it's
You
like
only
the
have two
closest you
best of
could
three
argue
series
would.
elsewhere.
Yeah, it's like you could
Yeah.
argue LCS technically do this many games in a
They do
way, but then
five.
it
Five then
Right?
across 2 days though. But that's 2 game
They
days.
do it 3 days. They basically
they do 3 days.
now,
Friday,
but then
Saturday,
then
Sunday.
but that's a lot more digestible in terms of the broadcast hours. And I'll also say,
Agreed.
like, there is something to giving matchups the weight they deserve. And effectively, if you are already pressed for time and also pressed for viewership, frankly, because no one is tuning in for that long of time unless they've got something else. They've got nothing else in their day. Like, nothing else at all. Because that is a whole day gone. Not half an afternoon, not an evening when you sit down to watch sports ball or whatever. That is a whole day gone. For like, what, 10 hours of content?
This is also
straight?
This is also a Japanese audience though, so when you have fans, you often have a higher density of super fans, right? Really within a lot of Asian audiences. So I mean, it'd be different if you had live audiences, because I think going out for a day to the studio, I do
that's
that for
true.
8 games actually. I do that. I mean, what they do in the LCK is effectively they have this long break between playoff series, between the best of 3s. So some fans would only want to come for one series, right? So you can kind of like shift. You have basically tickets to each series effectively, which makes sense. I think that makes more sense.
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, the problem is if you have best of 3s between, badly performing teams which haven't had much of a narrative for them this split. I don't know if you had, the Hawks last split versus, the Axes when they were really low down and the table. I'd be like, I wouldn't, as a fan, I probably
you could
wouldn't.
tune it for Fiesta.
Yeah, but it's not. But it's not like a thing. I wouldn't like rearrange my day to go watch it, as opposed to CJ Burning Core from last spring or DFM Sangok. I mean, I've really missed those lineups already now because I'm like,
Best
I missed
of
that
3
matchup.
Renegades versus Dignitas.
Yeah,
it's
pretty
time.
Oh, dude, that's a classic.
Things are like some people would be like,
I was
oh
a
my
big
God, that's
Renegades fan at
complete-
the time because it was Alex
Yeah.
Itch and Crumb. It was Alex Itch on that squad.
And
He was,
Freeze,
he was my
too.
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Fun,
It was
fun.
painful, man.
But then, okay, so like we're going a little bit off topic here. We're talking about scheduling, and this is something that we do commonly talk about here. It's we'll probably get far more into our post game when we're kind of recapping spring and kind of looking towards MSI and everything. We'll probably come back to this topic, but gentlemen, we must press forward. I know, I'm sorry, but let's go forward into our a juggernaut match of Detonation Focus Me versus Rascal Jesters. Now, let's be real. One of these teams we thought would maybe scrape playoffs, or we'll get into playoffs in 6th or 5th.
Yeah, good job, DFM.
The other, you broke me almost. The other, DFM, greatest team the LJL has ever seen. There is a quite big disparity between our expectations of coming in. And gentlemen, I think firstly to say that these teams are 1-1 is kind of a surprise. Now, we'll go into far more why that happened. And there's a lot more that we can unpack around this, but let's talk about the Rascal Jesters first, because this is a team that secured the 2nd place slot. Like, they got it, even though they did sadly lose at the very end to Sengoku, which felt very convincing by Sengoku. So I'm almost like, wait a second, are Sengoku meant to be our 2nd place team and it's taken them this long to improve? But then, even then, this is a complete brand new lineup. None of these players have played together before, at least in Japan, as a unit, and it's come together. What's our thoughts on the Jesters just overall between spring?
I think they have really improved from where they were at the start of the split. I think part of that is coaching. They brought in, their coach is a guy called... I can do this. It's not Vical. It is Vical. Okay, I was right. I had a moment thinking it wasn't him, but this guy has been. I've mentioned it before. I'll mention it again. Has been on some insane teams as their coach. He was on the KT Rolster, Arrows and Bullets when they were really good in 23-14. He was on Starhorn Roll Club and RNG coaching Uzi. He has been on Top Sports, who are now Top Esports, who have likes of Knight these days. He has been, and then he kind of went down to Kongdu Monster, which was not necessarily what he wanted to be doing, but whatever. And he moves on to Supermassive and All Knight, which are more smaller regions, but he's winning with Supermassive. He's winning with All Knight. And now he's on Rascal Jester, and he appears to have done a very similar thing, asked to bring in Sol in secret, and after some arguably slightly over-aggressiveness in the early weeks, they have solidified themselves as one of, if not the best bot lane in the league. They've got a rookie top, in Kanatu, who has been integrated really well, but he's got so many veterans around him. They got like a retiree mid laner to come out, and Recap has honestly had a great split as well. And Hachimachi just gets to be Hachimachi. We get to pick up Skarner and Kane depending on how he's feeling. Like, that's a great news for this team.
I think overall, Rascal Jesters have really been improving, and this was a bit of a misfits lineup overall. I don't know if you'd agree, Nymaera.
I mean, some of the players obviously have a lot more standing in the LJL than others. I mean, Hachimachi is still a champion. No, he's a player. He's still a player which, holds a lot of sway and has a lot of respect within the audience and with us as well. I think that Hachimachi, even in that summer 2020 roster, we're like, yeah, poor Hachimachi, right? It was just kind of sucky to see that. I thought that this bot lane they were bringing in of Sol and Secret would be good. I didn't think they'd be this good. But I guess, but that was the kind of thing where I could kind of still see that within like my error bars, right? I could be like, yes, they'll be somewhere in here, and they kind of hit the upper end of what I thought they could be, even pushing slightly beyond that. But having Kanatu and Recap come in and perform the way they have, and perform as a unit the way they have, that's just not something I foresaw. That's not something I saw coming. And the fact that they managed to do that through a whole split and build on it,
was really good.
That is a sign of really good cohesiveness as a team, and also being able to weaponize that from a coaching staff perspective too. Of course, again, you don't really know what goes on the coaching staff side of things, because we don't know what they've been prepping a lot of the time, but it seems like they've been very adaptable and very, very good at kind of hitting the ground running in each match. So I'm really looking forward to this series, and a lot of that is because Rascal Jester actually have been able to improve week on week. So given a couple of weeks off, gonna be fun.
Now let's look at it from Detonation Focus Me perspective as kind of how they've done. 12-2. Is that the record you think DFM are happy with? Like, what is a happy record? Like, what? DFM's in such a weird place, right? Like, because they want to be undefeated, but they also want to try some stuff out. They want to play around, because winning and getting the first place is great, but they don't need to get all the way up. They just need to be in the Juggernaut match. And realistically, first is slightly better because of side selection, but being in first place and then actually going to MSI is probably more of the goal for them as opposed to anything else.
Yeah,
I think the goal for them is to get MSI by whatever means, and then get ARIA international experience before Worlds. Like, I don't expect MSI to go well, like we were saying on previous podcasts, because of the whole Hazu factor, right? There's one of Sam's favorite phrases, you must be this high to ride the MSI roller coaster. Like, not the high,
Mickey
this
X
tall.
and Reckless.
Sure, you can go. Don't go high to MSI. That would probably be not so good.
It's Vulcan or Core JJ from Liquid.
Yeah,
it's career. It's like.
But the thing is, like, I think this has to be the training mode for future international events for players like Arya, who has the talent domestically, just needs to transfer that somewhere else. I look at this and I look at how they kind of like halfway to their full roster in terms of they need to get gang in again, and I'm like 12-2 while they're kind of like having kind of like a not their perfected roster. That's damn good, actually. I mean, dropping the games they did, I mean, we'll talk about that, I suppose, but I still think DFM are happy with this state of affairs.
Yeah, I would agree. My overall thoughts on DFM at the end of this is, they've played around with a few things. Their losses are what we're going to get into now, but honestly, one of these losses I just kind of chalk up to just and one of them, we saw Siros and Gang come in for the first time as well throughout the LJL split. So again, I'm kind of like, I'm not. I remember back in week 5, week 6, our Super Week recap. I definitely was a bit more harsh, but now as I've come to kind of really see how everything's gone out with Siros and Gang and how we've seen them a second time around, it's like, well, no, this is actually definitely DFM just wanting to get reps in with everybody, just letting sure that people don't get too cold on the bench and bring them in. Let's talk about this first loss. This was back in week 4 where Detonation Focus Me versus Sengoku Gaming. And honestly, this was the way that I always sum this up. And I think if I'm fair to say, our overall consensus became DFM just didn't draft in a way that was respectful. They also didn't play particularly respectfully. And they almost still, and they stayed very competitive the whole way through against Sengoku Gaming while doing this. Credits to Sengoku for winning. Like 100%, it's on them to actually get the Nexus to explode. But DFM kind of gave it to them a little bit.
Yeah, like the thing is, I don't even necessarily hate having Akali into Nar or Lucian into Victor by themselves.
Yeah.
But together, with the way you'd ordered the draft, it kind of set up Sengoku to get what they wanted. So like the thing is, I don't doubt that Arya and Ebby are exceptional in their picks, right? They run over those picks
we know
pretty well.
They've got histories in these two champions.
Yeah. And like, so like, I don't, but again, it's more the order in which they were picked that threw me a little bit there.
Yeah, so just to put things into context, so what happened with Sengoku is they locked in with their first 3 picks. I believe it was Rel, Nar, and Hecarim. 3 heavy dive champions. And then, obviously the second bans come through, and I think at that point we had Kai'Sa, Alistair, and Udyr locked into his first pick Udyr, which is kind of standard now, I suppose. You had your solo laners left to pick. And then 4th pick is Kalista, and you're sat there like, this is a huge punish short-ranged engages, because you've got, Hecarim's really good at that. Kalista's really good at escaping short-range champions and dancing around the fight. Nara in a similar kind of situation too. And Rel's really good at that. So 4 champions which are really good at hyper diving, but they're short-range. They punish short-range champions in the same kind of ticket on that, though. And you lock in 2 short-range champions that want to dive into them. Like, that is not the key to success. I think, you look at that and you think, if you had an Orianna in that game, then things go a lot better for them. Again, you could probably still have one of those 2 champions, just not both, because it leaves you basically bereft of all tools to play out, play out anti-dive fights, to play out very short-range brawly fights, because you lose because their champions are just specialized towards that. It was very, and then of course the Victor comes in as last pick, and you're like, all right, okay, that kind of seals the casket, really.
And I brought this up every time we talk about this game, which is done a couple of times as well. But I think also just in terms of in-game, Crash played out the counter ganks in this game really, really well on the Hecarim. He basically catches Arya and Steel out as they tried to play on Ramune, who escapes by running down mid with the devastating charge and Ghost active. He then does the same in bot lane, so he turns that into a 1-for-1. At that point, both the early plays, both of these early lanes, which are basically looking to snowball and get control, because that was DFM's win condition, don't work off the way they want to. And from there as well, like even the in-game plays, like serious credit to Crash as well for this one.
I mean, a huge credit for Sengoku in that game. They won the big team fight that they needed to win. And then they were able to snowball that into the Dragon, which then a few kills later ended up being the Baron, and Sengoku well and truly got control. And I think you're right to say that obviously Lucian and Ebby, Lucian and Akali, not Lucian and Ebby. Ebby's champion now. Obviously, they're fine in isolation, but as a part of a greater, larger kind of composition, it's kind of not the greatest thing in the world. However, DFM was shown to just kind of play this, and that was the first loss that they got, and it definitely... DFM weren't very happy after that one. I remember their
in the
next
interviews,
game was...
Abby was basically saying, we drafted disrespectfully, we got slapped, and that's kind of what we'd pieced together anyway, so no harm, no foul there, I suppose.
Nope.
At least they knew it. It's like, yeah, that was our bad.
And as we said, Sengoku deserved the win because they also played for it. So, well and truly a competitive game, even if DFM did maybe make it a bit easier for their opponents. However, Detonation Focus Me's second loss is actually to their Juggernaut match contenders. And this is Rascal Jesters. This is back in week number 5, gentlemen. And I don't want to chalk it down to just Zeros isn't king anymore in the mid lane. He can't do his crazy Heimerdinger picks. Gang is still very impactful. Kinatu obviously looks pretty good versus Ebby, which is something that we have seen from him in interviews and what's said around him. He's more than happy to play into anybody in the LJL, which at least is showing confidence from this young 17-year-old. Outside of that, obviously, now this game was only about 1 or 2k in the balance for the longest time. It was something that, it was a game that DFM could have won. And they were playing side lanes and getting lots of gold onto Utapon. It just wasn't quite enough. And Seraphine and Zilean are really good champions, apparently.
Yeah, like
I praise it.
what I'll say with this one is, once again, I think I wonder what you guys both think about this one, but I feel like DFM once again had a bit of an awkward draft in this one. The Nocturne really gets screwed over by the fact you've got a Zilean and a Seraphine, because anybody he tries to dive onto basically doesn't die. And especially because it's not full burst Noct anymore, it's much more of a chase down one with Gordrinker and Sterex. It's about kind of staying around and hitting people harder. Just before like the Strikebreaker Nocturne that's become a thing, because this was back in Gordrinker patches. But
this game felt like Utapon versus the world. And yeah, I think Gang had a decent game on the LSI. I can't actually remember this game that vividly because obviously I didn't.
Gang gets first blood out playing the Gank in a 2v3.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whether a 3v3. Yeah.
No, and it's great to see this 2v2 come back. But yes, it kind of felt like Rascal Jester. I mean, like it felt like DFM could have gotten away with this draft last year against a lesser team. They didn't versus Rascal Jester. Rascal Jester just like said, "You're drafting this, okay? Well, we'll just play through our Camille, which is obscenely strong. We've got." And again, it was kind of like the whole, if you got diving champions with Zilean, you stop the first kill coming in, you reset the fight, and like you get to just keep running forward again and again. And when you have like double move speed auras as well, if you are out of position just by an inch, you just get caught out that much more quickly. And we saw that a lot. Like having Udyr with move speed is very strong. You don't really get to outplay that. You have to flash away or something like that. And then they've used like 5-second cooldowns for it. Good job. So yeah, I think Rascal Jester just had a lot more power picks off the current patch. I think DFM were disrespectful again a little bit in the draft phase for that, and this is the kind of draft which you would not expect to see multiple times in a series, because the best of one though this registers of that loss.
And the thing is, I wouldn't even necessarily call it straight disrespectful, because they came in with a particular idea of how they want to play. Like Nocturne goes in and basically like Zyra and Heimerdinger basically made their lives horribly difficult. And like, it's obviously they had some things up there. They had some cards up their sleeves they wanted to play with this roster. And like RJ go, well, that's just a bad draft. Here, try this out for size. And like, that's not necessarily playing disrespectful. It's just basically DFM getting like slapped with a no you reverse card on the Zilean coming through.
I to be honest, I think that this also part of it just comes down to the fact that they were playing Syros and Gang for the first time. On the stage, right? Like, I mean, I don't want to go too down on this. I know I was far more flaming more Syros and obviously flaming the Heimerdinger, how it just kind of is an awkward pick in this composition. The Nocturne doesn't quite work, and it's a weird spot. But like, hey, whatever. These are the two losses. These are the two times we can actually nitpick DFM, and one of the times Ari's not even there for it, and it's like, oh well, what am I meant to do here? This is the guy that we're meant to be talking about all the time, because he might be the face and the star of the LJL soon, taking over the crown of the king himself, or the emperor himself, actually. I mean, gentlemen, let's talk about this one thing very quickly and then go on to predictions. Remember when they first fought back in week 1? This was a very different affair. Rascal Jesters obviously got kind of slaughtered, like lambs in a slaughter, sadly. But that's honestly what we expect. And the fact Detonation Focus Me coming into this Juggernaut match are on a 4-win streak, whereas the last time we saw Rascal Jesters, they lost. I've already mentioned this earlier, that they lost to Sengoku Gaming all the way back in week 7. We haven't seen them for several weeks now. Sengoku definitely look like they're running hot. They beat Rascal Jester, they then beat V3, and now they've 3-0'd Crest Gaming Act. Sengoku definitely on a trajectory. Where is Rascal Jester?
I mean, I do think even in that first game, actually, Rascal Jester had that was the game where Recap solo killed Arya, Sol solo killed Utapon. They got first blood, first turret. They got Dragon Souls. They got 4 things, and then they just kind of got out team fought the later the game went on. I think part of that was Ebby kind of popping off a bit on the Renekton, at least in the laning phase, kind of at least keeping Kanatu less relevant in that game. And Steel had a hell of a game on Talia.
Oh yes, he did.
And so, like,
they really used Arya's ultimate as well, really well in the Twisted Fate.
Yeah, exactly.
division.
After that first blood, it was like Arya. I mean, died in a couple of like 1 for X fights and stuff like that, and when they got a bit more messy.
Those, yeah.
But I think that like Rascal Jester, at least at that point, showed that particularly their early game and their laning phase was something to be afraid of, and we were like, oh, right, okay, suddenly Rascal Jester are a team that we need to keep an eye on. We'll see if it lasts though. Turns out it did last, and they did a hell of a lot of good stuff this split. But the fact they managed to do that back in week 1 was something that we were keeping our eyes on, particularly because I think DFM played Rascal Jester and V3, and they were kind of taken late game by both of them to an extent, and they kind of team fought their way out of that situation. Now the question is, at this point, coming into playoffs, are we at a point now where you can, team fight versus DFM because you've ramped up enough as Rascal Jester? That's going to be a big point for me going into the series, really.
Yeah, because I think the other thing for DFM is they've integrated Arya increasingly better over the weeks. Arya is less alone in his lane, where sometimes he was dying in a 1v1 in lane, despite getting good CS numbers and DPM and things as the team comes together later into the game, right? But like that early 10-15 minute marks, he's getting a bit more vision. He's a little bit more in sync with Steel, particularly like that. And so it's all well and good saying, can you out team fight them? It's not just you who've been ramping up. Like that's a big deal. And Kazu is a little bit more confident to make plays, well, considering he's in as a sub. That's a nice deal. You've seen DFM have practiced with Seros and Gang as well, so you've got that flexibility in there. That's a lot of cards that DFM have to play at quite a high level. What I'll say for the Jesters, though, is yes, they've improved a great deal. I think Sol in particular has really, really come online as a very hard carry. You just don't give the guy Senna, basically, or potentially Ezreal either, actually. I think he's just really good at those champions.
But you put yourself into a really awkward spot by doing that, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And I mean, you want to give Utapon Ezreal if you can get a chance, right? So,
Yeah. Well, exactly. It's not like Utapon is a bad Ezreal or a bad Senna. Like, that's no bad thing.
Utapon plays everything well. I don't know. Like if anything goes wrong with DFM, it's just not Utapon. Pretty much
very rarely. Very rarely. He's so consistent. I mean, that's partly what makes for a great AD carry, right? Consistency is king for DPM.
There's actually an argument to say that Utapon is actually the region's best ever player.
Yeah,
just based on that.
See that argument? Yeah, I'm there with you. It's him or Ebby for me in my mind.
Recognizable names outside of Siros and Ebby.
So put it this way. Yeah. So I was lucky enough to have like a caster workshop with Rosker a couple of weeks ago, and I said like, hey, cool, wow, I'm doing LJL stuff. That's awesome. They were like, oh yeah, how's Utapon doing? That's the first thing they asked. It's like, oh yeah, if that's the first name you think of, he's got to be doing something right. And I know like a couple of other casters like around like who've obviously been casting for a little while. It's like, oh yeah, I remember when Utapon played Rise top.
Player.
It's like, Utapon. Oh, he used to play Rise top and he was the best top in the region. Then he went to AD carry. He was the best AD carry in the region. It's like, yeah, you're not wrong actually.
Which is pretty good. Yeah. Stepping away from that a little bit. Like my point being, DFM really flexible. Lots of very strong things they can play. If Jesters are going to get a look in, is that they are not without their own creative streak. They have pulled out some really interesting drafts. Things like, Sol kind of debuting that mythic Ezreal, doing crazy things on that. They have run Kayn in the jungle and made that look real good as well. Like, they've got some cards to play and some players who are willing and supported by the way the team works to pull out some unusual stuff. They too are a resilient team when they need to. Hatchemetry can oscillate between being, I'll drop 100 CS, but I'll be on Skarner and be really irritating, to I'm going to play Kayn and hard carry if you need me to. Like that kind of flexibility with some curveballs and some pocket picks could catch DFM out as well.
I actually think Hatchemetry.
Wait, so no.
Right, go.
Okay.
No.
I want to make you, Sam, right here, right now, because of what you've just said. What's your prediction then?
3-0 DFM.
Wow. All right. Do you want to justify that? Because you kind of just bigged up the Rascal Jesters a little bit, and now you're saying 3-0 DFM.
I have.
That's a bit contrary, sir.
It is, because I really like the Jesters, and I'm hoping I'm wrong, but I'm saying this is all great against any other team. Because you're still trying to do this into Arya and Ebby and Steel and Utapon. Kazu's down there. Like, he's not been bad. Like, he's middle of the pack for supports in some ways, probably. Maybe a bit even top half, which is kind of crazy, because he's a substitute the coach. But, like, there you have it. But I think that there are still some problems with Jesters in that if Sol doesn't pop off, they can look a lot more. It can be a bit more problematic for them, and that's not easy versus DFM. And also, if Kinatu is left alone in a lane versus Ebby, Poor guy is a rookie. Is a rookie in his first playoff match. It's all on land now as well, and it's versus Ebby of all people. And if DFM know how to do one thing, it's play through top. And Kanatu's got better at playing weak side. Don't get me wrong, but when he does play weak side, he still loses a lot. Like he doesn't die as much, but he loses.
No,
a
he
lot.
outplays deck dives well, but he doesn't always get access to the same farm in the way that I know Nap sometimes does. Although this year he's actually not been so good at that actually. But 2020 Nap particularly, stuff like that. We're just like, you just can't keep him down. But yeah, he's good at surviving.
Did it great versus the on the Hawks versus Cog on that Tristana, right? Like, how did that Gnar should never have been allowed as much CS considering you've died 3 times.
Yeah.
That's my point, right? I don't think Kanatu.
Yeah, and my worry particularly against Ebby is Ebby does not let people off easy. He just never does. If anyone is, if we're talking about punishing laners in the league, Ebby is the top. I can't think of anyone who punishes more.
We can just think of what he did on that set. That set
versus poor Eunyan.
Yeah.
God. It was horrifying.
He had a 60 CS lead, pretty much from the first 60 CS in the game. It was something like 60-1 at some point. It was almost the only game I can think of being more dominant in a laning phase was Faker versus Maple at season 6 MSI.
You're bringing up Faker. That's not fair.
Exactly.
Cassiopeia versus LeBlanc. It was basically walks up beyond the wave and destroys.
He walks up beyond the wave and uses a trick of minion aggro to just twin fang Maple away from the wave. And again, like that's the only more dominant laning phase from that kind of perspective that I've ever seen. I guess some of Khan's games as well, but like that's when you compare. And don't get me wrong, Eunyan was not the strongest laning player, but when you can pull off that kind of thing and just have the understanding of a lane to be like, I can dominate this. If you show an inch, Ebby does just tend to tear off your whole arm.
And Nymaera, you're very much going. Ebby is going to slap Kanatu if he gets an opportunity to. Where's your prediction going?
I think it's a 3-1, and actually for me the key player is Hachimecha. I think Hachimecha can path to upset DFM's lanes, particularly because DFM have not been great at shielding their early lane states. That's why we've seen them drop early kills quite a lot. They've had their solo lanes be the target of first blood more than you would expect from a dominant team. They tend to win through their team fighting and their mid game plays rather than early game dominance snowballing the whole game, a la your Damwon and everyone else. Although they kind of have it all, so that's not really a fair comparison. So I think that Hachimecha, potentially something like that, Skarner could just like get spires, get a really good path, and then punish any lane and then set up a win condition. I don't think it's going to consistently happen. I think that steal's too good. I think the lanes of DFM are too good. But one game might work for them.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen them already win one game, and we don't know if Syros and Gang might see an appearance in this series. We don't know.
Like, the thing is, we've all been like, myself and Nymaera, and I'm suspecting you as well, Lexi, have all kind of given DFM a fairly heavy edge.
Oh yes, I'm currently sitting at 3-1. I will give my final prediction on broadcast, as I like to wait until the absolute last moment to make it.
But like what I will say is that Jesters definitely have talent, and they can draft real well. And if they've prepped stuff that catches DFM flat-footed, they could absolutely take this series. I just don't think it's that likely. But I think there's a world where, like, I think Jesters could win this 3-2. There is a world where that happens in my mind.
So I want to ask you that. What does that world slightly look like then?
It basically involves having DFM think they have got something that gives Ebby and Aria, there we go, momentary mind blank, a good matchup, and then they just throw in a curveball like, here's a Zillion. What's your draft do now? Or here is this Kane. You don't know how to play around this, do you? And we get that
mid Kane. We're gonna see a mid Kane from Rika.
So I've actually been hearing that mid Kane works into Galio. It's stupidly good, apparently. My
mid lane has been talking about that. I don't want to see it. I keep telling them no, bonk.
Well, see. Funnily enough, I heard that from another UK pro actually. So, I mean, and actually I can understand it, being like, what does Galio do, actually, after a while? It's like, you just become a hitting bot for the orbs, and it's like, suddenly Rust's on the table, and you're like...
You're an alt bot.
So basically, I think it's either drafting where Rascal just creativity really throws DFM's drafting for a loop, especially if they are being a little bit bold in draft, like they sometimes want to be. Read bold as disrespectful. They've done it before. They could absolutely do it again. Second thing, Sol can be an X factor, and we all know it. Like,
He's shown it.
dude, his DPM numbers are frankly absurd, and if he can pull that off consistently through a series, I don't necessarily expect it because I think that's really hard to do. But if you can, you have a carry who could win this series for you.
I'm going to go in another one. I'm going to give DFM a third point. If they bring in Siros and gang and Siros fucking runs it down against Recap, I can so see that happening because no offense to Siros, but I put this in the document. I didn't say it on the broadcast currently, but I'm going to do it now. Siros, mate, your Ziggs, still really good because guess what? Ziggs is actually okay in the meta right now, right? Don't play your Heimer, mate. Play Karma. Karma's great. I love Karma right now.
I know you do, yeah.
But don't play Heimer. Heimer's not good anymore. And the thing is, right, Siros has been the best in the mid lane in the LJL for so long, right? For so long. Wait, like what? His closest competition was Ramune and Dasher. He's been the best for so long. I'm almost like, is he just assuming his cheese picks are always going to work? And I could definitely see a world where maybe Rascal Jets are able to squeak a few by because Siros just goes, oh, I thought I could just win.
Always the curse of DFM, particularly when they got to international, is like, it was kind of...
Seeing where I'm going with this.
It was the same reason why Doinb struggled for so long to find success, because...
Thank you.
What you effectively do is you throw out the accepted meta from the window. You just throw it out and you just say, we are playing this, and you have to respect it. That works until your team is punished for not playing those meta picks. For instance, what happens when Doinb can't play...
Can't lane.
Yeah, well, he can't lane effectively into certain picks and stuff like that. Versus ex-champion, Y champion, particularly when like you've got
B3 at Worlds in 2020, gentlemen.
Exactly.
We know this one way too well.
Gallia, baby.
I mean, what's saddening for me about that is that actually Ace was a Syndra player, didn't want to play the Syndra at all, just went back towards the Galio and just kind of like...
he's a great Gallia player, but he over tried to make it work and just couldn't.
Yeah, and also just like Galio is not a champion which loses gracefully.
Nope,
not really. Anyway, that's a whole different other...
Yeah.
Is there any other way that you think, Nymaera, that that Rascal Jester can beat DFM, or are the three things that me and Initia1ise have said? Do you think we've kind of scraped that barrel so deep there's not even water left? We're almost getting the wood at the bottom now.
I'll give another point for DFM to make it even worse. This is like, how long has it been since DFM have been seen? So on stage, like 3 weeks now. 3?
Yeah.
This is now, well, it'll be like 3 to 4 weeks that DFM have had to prep.
Wait,
DFM with
that's
prep.
not good.
DFM with prep have been historically very, very strong. We saw that in summer 2020 playoffs when they came out of the regular split and like, they kind of scraped in. This is the worst split ever. It's looking awkward, and they just smash. Yeah, I mean, okay, like first series against Burning Core, yes, goes a bit awkward, but like every series after that, they just run over the competition.
They nearly took that
and they nearly took the whole playoffs bracket. They almost did. Yeah, I mean, the V3 game was really fun. That's a very high level series, one of the highest that we've ever seen in LGL. But like, I mean, heck, I remember like that 3-week break again in spring, which we were like, oh, what the hell's happening with DFM? Like, they lost to Sengoku, they didn't come in very well prepped, and then like they have that one series and like,
behold,
put them up, Sengoku, and that just slaps them about really. So I look at this series. Since they already had a good read on the meta, I look at this and I'm like, yeah, DFM with prep time, it's not just Rascal Jester which can bring out the weird stuff.
So, gentlemen, we've said the world which we think will exist. We've given the worlds in which we think Rascal Jester could maybe try and beat DFM with a counterpoint back over to Destination Focus Me at the end. What would be the result that Rascal Jester are happy with throughout the whole playoffs? Is third place happy? Are they happy if they make it back to the finals? I think it's easy for us to be like, we're expecting this to be pretty dominant from DFM, but if Rascal Jester can make it back to the finals and have at least a showing, is that good? Do we expect a different challenger to make it there? Are they okay with third place? What do you guys think Rascal Jester should be happy with? And remember, this is spring split for this roster, first time ever, so this is already pretty good.
I think they want to push for second minimum, considering how they've done.
Okay.
That said, I think if they lose DFM, they want that rematch. And I think they want to be able to push DFM. I think would be the kind of end goal. That said, effectively, they're guaranteed top 3, which is pretty damn good going, really, all things said and done. But
good prize money.
Yeah, it's not bad, but I think with the squad and how well it's been performing, considering the expectations coming in, I think they could look to try and win it all. That's the dream, right? I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's expected. But, they're in the Juggernaut match, and they should be looking to try and get it all if they can.
I mean, there's a chance they come in with a better read on the meta. There's always that chance. That's what Sengoku did in spring Juggernaut match. They came in, they understood that Victor and Varus were very, very strong, and they played around that to a T. Of course, in the finals, didn't work out. Got a bit slapped. But that's exactly what could happen here. Maybe Rascal Jester have a couple of picks which are really, really strong, and they punish them with that. I think that they should push for second. I think that if they get, as long as they don't get 3-0 twice by DFM, I think they're happy.
Okay, so 3-0 twice is the only result where Rascal Jester are sad. At least getting one win out of one of these series, they're happy with it? Just to confirm.
Honestly, I think I look at that and I'm like, that's what I could walk away with and say we can build on that. 2 3-0s in a row, that's kind of rough. I think,
but then it's good for DFM, right? On the opposite side.
I agree. I think that the more that Rascal Jester push DFM, and they push each other, I mean, it's the iron sharpens iron analogy, right? You know, you don't get to push ahead unless like you have these breakout teams which end up pushing the level of the whole league up. I mean, you end up spreading this knowledge and this style of play and the level of play, right? By playing all these teams to the highest of your ability. So yeah, I mean, I hope that we get more than 6 games between them, but there's a chance that Sengoku could come in and slap them, and I think they would be sad at that point if they don't get back to the finals. There's always a chance that happens, and heck, I mean, V3 V3 could still make it up, but I still think it might be Sengoku. But yeah.
We'll have to wait and see how that Sengoku V3 series goes. We've got another week until we have to start giving our true thoughts. And gentlemen, in that episode of the podcast, which will be 11, and we'll be recapping the actual what actually happened in this series of Detonation Focus Me versus Rascal Jester. But before we can do that, and before we can even end this podcast, gentlemen, we have a listener question from Lil Maestro, and they ask us, would you rate this as the most exciting / competitive split ever? Feels like all 4 potential remaining series will be good. Interesting. So I definitely can't answer this perfectly, as I don't have perfect knowledge on the LJL history. I can maybe talk about the last 2 years. I don't know about you guys.
Okay, so before then, you had a much less expanded playoff bracket. You would basically have 3 games. It was basically a gauntlet. You'd have second and third playoff, and then they go play finals. And they'd basically be back-to-back, I think, actually. I'm trying to remember if actually they were back-to-back in the same day. And
from my understanding, it was.
Yeah, just from my, I like there to be drama. I like there to be that, that kind of rapid fire action. But I prefer the competitive nature of an expanded bracket, having more teams involved. So I think that 2020 forwards has been the better system, and I think that lends to better playoffs in terms of the actual excitingness of that. I do think that 2019 semis into finals were fun actually, because actually they were our very first casts. Actually, that's what we used to practice cast Seminai. And I think those were some really good. Yeah, so 2019 summer I thought was really good split. And we had some times when you had the second place finisher kind of finishing off in first. But I do think that the 2020 plus era has been a much better format. So I would probably choose between any of those 3. I think Spring Playoffs was hamstringed a bit by the delays. Okay. Don't know what you think, Sam.
I mean, I know.
Okay, so I'll throw out this particular option. So I think there's a good argument actually, honestly, for where we thought we wouldn't be that competitive. Actually saying, oh no, actually no, this split, particularly the top sort of five or so teams have actually been legitimately very competitive. I might throw out 2017 summer, which was DFM Rampage 7th Heaven, Unsold Stuff Gaming.
That 5-game series.
Yeah, that whole season was genius. That was Ramone in his prime, Saros in his prime. Yeah. It was really good.
Yeah, I do know that best of 5 in the summer was a really good one in 2017. When I was having a brief look over for this question, I was like, I guess that's the one.
Really good series.
But honestly, 2020 summer playoffs was an absolute roller coaster because it was Detonation Focus Me in the lower bracket and them fighting their way back up. This was Sengoku Gaming, and it was like, well, they've spent all this money. They've got Blank, they've got Pyrion, their Apperman's looking good. Like, is this maybe the team? And then losing in a 3-1 to V3 Esports, and then DFM versus Sengoku. That's a rematch from our finals and semi-final and the Juggernaut match from Spring Split. Like, there was a lot of narrative points. So I think from a narrative perspective, I would say currently 2020 Summer's still up above this Spring Split.
2020 Summer with DFM falling off made things really interesting. I think this split, a detracting point is that we don't have CGA Burning Core, actually. Which was like, there were some games and some matchups you were just like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait for them. Like,
Sengoku. I mean, Rascal Jets at DFM now is pretty great.
I think that Summer was marred by Sengoku falling off so hard. Like, their Juggernaut into their semi-final match was just hard to watch.
That's tough.
It was bad. It was rough. So that's kind of detracts a bit from that. Spring marred by the break in playoffs, even though the Juggernaut match was really fun, and then actually DFM versus V3 and DFM versus Sengoku in the finals were really good series. Oh no, then that also had Crest Gaming out Rascal Jester in the first round.
That was amazing.
I think that I actually think that last spring, currently, given how playoffs went with the 5-game series there, even though Axis got shut out by V3, even though that was still a good series because Silas, like Boogie, just popped off in that series too.
What I'll also add in is there's a little bit of exciting is one thing, competitive is another. How are we defining competitive? Are we talking competitive within the confines of the league? All these teams are relatively equal, and that makes things close and therefore competitive. Or is it competitive in terms of these teams are just at the highest level we've seen in this league?
Most exciting, I think the most exciting series in terms of narrative was Summer Finals. I think the most exciting playoffs bracket, Spring probably tops Summer for me. Just because of... Oh, well, but then you also still got Burning Core DFM.
What are you talking about competitive? Are you talking competitive within the league?
Yeah, it's subjective at that point. Subjective. Subjective.
Yeah.
I mean,
I prefer Summer just for narrative points and because of how much it uses Spring as a springboard off. And to be honest, the fact that Burning Core pushed the FM to the full 5 games was kind of crazy. But the fact that we had to deal with
Archer given the carry potential after failing in Spring, like
but then I can also be like, well, one of the other round 1 games was kind of a washout. V3 versus Axis in Spring was a 3-0 shutout,
but then it was still played really well, and that was still exciting.
3-1 shutout, really. So it's a weird one, awkwardly for me.
Like if I was going series by series, I'd take the V3 Axis series over the Sengoku CGA series. Well, because the first game was fun, and the rest of it was just kind of
like if I'm talking series, Rampage versus DFM 2017 was spicy as all hell. It was 3-2. Rampage came out on top. Like
I think they traded top laners going like 1-7, 1-8 between game 1 and 2.
So it was so Paz was on DFM, Ebby was on Rampage, and it was Tussle and Ramane on Rampage in their full prime. It was Yutori Mayashi, who's now retired, of course. With Dara, who was around about, and obviously he's now retired with
this was
a lot of difficulties in the scene there, actually. And it was Vivid and Utapon on the other side with Seros and Steel. Like, that whole roster, that whole that these guys have been fighting neck and neck for so long. It was really, really cool. It was a little bit like the 2015 Origin versus Fnatic finals for EU, maybe. Back in the day, like, that was really big stuff.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would throw that one out as an old school option.
Yeah. So I think with how hard Sengoku fell off, I think that this is more competitive than last split. Given that I think that this is a 4-horse race, actually. And actually all 4 of the remaining teams that are in, I can see them pulling something out. If V3 can like regain their form, Sengoku being very strong. Whereas last split, it did boil down to V3 DFM. It was going to be one of those two. Because Sengoku fell off that hard, even though going into it was very competitive. I think at the end of the regular split, I would have said Summer was more competitive in a lot of ways. Because I think that Sengoku coming in and CGA being a relevant factor too. But like with how, CGA and Sengoku both just fell apart. I think that now, this is more competitive, most exciting. There were just so many storylines in Summer 2020, as you're saying, Lexi. I think I would probably...
Preference at this point.
Yeah, it's personal preference. For me, I would say that Summer 2020 was more exciting. I think right now it's more competitive just on the eye test, but then we have to wait to see how everything comes out. We don't know what's going to happen with the patch and Juggernaut match and everything else.
Yeah, sadly, it could just be DFM 3030, and it's like, oh, well, that was it. But it could also be a full 5-game series, and we just don't know how that is. It's setting itself up. This spring is definitely setting itself up, and something that I put in our podcast document. We didn't even touch on it. But this was around Rascal Jester moving forward. I mean, summer for a lot of these teams gets huge. DFM hit Voltron, right? Sengoku have a full split to actually show what they're made of. And we've seen that. Can V3 power up like they did last summer? The Hawks, this is the reason maybe why Sengoku didn't even want to pick against them. They look decent versus 33, and maybe somebody else like Summer could offer us a lot. But we're not there yet, gentlemen. We've still got Spring Split to go through. And this also does bring us to the end of the podcast, gentlemen. Do you have anything else you want to say around the LJL? Do you have any thoughts around the teams and expectations?
Well, I hope this is more exciting and competitive than the other playoffs. That'd be great. I'd love to see a 5-game series all the way back to back now. I mean, it'd be hard on the production side of things, but you love to see it.
I think that's fair. I really want Rascal Jesters to turn up and play. Like, really, at least push DFM. I have my prediction in. I'm sticking by it. But at the same time, there is a world where Jesters come in and make things interesting. There's a world where Sengoku and V3 have a great best of 5 to come up and be in that sort of like semi-finals match and make things interesting. I want these last 3 matches in that particular upper last 3, the Juggernaut into the semis, into the finals, to be as absolutely nail-biting as possible. And I think we've got teams who could do it.
You've got your cake, sir.
I want to eat it.
And you want to eat it too. You want a competitive series, but you also you believe DFM are going to 3-0. And I
the
doubt...
heart versus the head, my friend.
Very much feels like that. Well, with that all said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the podcast from myself, MaskedSwan, Initia1ise in the center, and Nymaera over on the other side, or up and down, depending on where we are on your screens. And that is our preparation for Destination Focus Me facing off against Rascal Jester. And obviously us recapping in this same episode, V3 facing off against the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks game, that full 5-game spectacular performance that came out that did lead V3 into winning, meaning that after next week's or this week's match of DFM versus Jesters, it will be Sengoku Gaming versus V3 Sports, and man, that's going to be a hell of a series to watch. I have where I'm leaning, but both of these performances definitely mean going into that playoffs is going to be interesting. There's so much to unpack, but we have to end it as everyone's requested that we do shorter episodes. So this is where we're at, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. And as always, you can find this audio podcast on all more audio streaming platforms, as well as the LJL.
No, it's on SoundCloud. That's the other S. When I try to make a meme and mess it up. I'm sorry. Continue.
Give us a rating over on Apple Podcasts or any of those audio streaming. Even if you are on Anchor and I go black for some reason, you can keep going and it's fine because it doesn't matter. I'm back. Hello, everybody. And with that all said, technical problems and my camera turning off, who knows what else could happen over at the LJLOU. But we'll be there with live coverage on this Saturday. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back with you very soon. Bye-bye.